When I opened my eyes, the ceiling looked like a cloudy sky frozen in time, sterile white with a hum from the fluorescent lights above. The scent of antiseptic clung to the air, heavy and sharp, the kind that settles into your lungs and makes breathing feel like work. I blinked slowly, letting the world come back piece by piece as the nurse adjusted my fore. A small smile tugged at her lips, tired but gentle. "You're awake again," she whispered, like she didn't want to disturb whatever fragile peace hovered around me. I tried to smile back, but the weight in my chest wasn't just from the surgery. It was from silence. From the emptiness of the room. From the fact that the chair beside my hospital bed had remained mostly empty. No flowers, no balloons, no half-warm cup of coffee dropped off by a rushed sibling who whispered they'd come back later. Just the hum of machines, the occasional footsteps in the corridor, and the steady beep reminding me that my heart was beating, even when it felt like it shouldn't bother. Surgery isn't just a physical wound. It's a moment when you look around to see who stands beside you. Turns out, that list is shorter than I thought. I had always imagined that if something ever happened to me, I wouldn't have to ask for help. Because I had spent my entire life giving it. I raised 2 younger brothers like they were my own. Cooked when my mother worked double shifts. Walked them to school when Dad disappeared for days. Every field trip form, every late-night study panic, every crisis, they came to me. And I never once complained. I wore responsibility like armor, thinking it would one day protect me too. But here, hooked to 4 lines and wrapped in scratchy blankets, that belief felt naive, childish even. My sister came once. A single visit that smelled more like obligation than love. She stood at the foot of my bed checking her phone every few seconds, tapping her acrylic nails against the screen like she couldn't wait to leave. "You look better," she'd said, not meeting my eyes. I wanted to say, you could sit. Or ask how I feel. Or just hold my hand for a second. Instead, I thanked her. Because people like me always say thank you, even when we receive nothing. She left faster than she arrived, mumbling something about errands. No hug. No warmth. The door closed behind her, and the nurse looked at me like she could see the crack inside my chest widening. The nurse checked my vitals again and gave me a soft pat on the arm. "You should rest. Healing takes time." Healing. Funny word. It sounds hopeful. Gentle. But healing in loneliness feels like punishment. The next day, I woke to the sound of a cart being pushed down the hall. Metal wheels squeaking. A radio playing faintly from a distant nurse's station. My phone sat on the table beside me, screen blank. No missed calls. No messages. I used to think my absence would shake the world of the people I loved. That the phone would ring non-stop, that someone would rush through the door breathless saying, "I couldn't stay away, I had to check on you." Reality is quieter. Colder. I spent most days staring at the window, watching the sun crawl across the sky, wishing time would hurry so I wouldn't have to feel each minute pass like sand dragging through my veins. One afternoon, as the nurse adjusted my curtain, she asked casually, "So your family's managing everything while you're here?" She said it kindly. But it hit me like a blade wrapped in silk. Managing everything. I forced a breath. "I hope so," I whispered. "I trust them." But the truth was, I didn't know anymore. Trust doesn't break loudly. It cracks quietly, like frost creeping across glass, barely visible until everything shatters. I overheard my sister in the hallway once. She thought I was sleeping. whispering on the phone, voice low and rushed.
Yeah.
She'll be here another week probably. I told them we can do it while she's sedated. No, she signed it before, don't worry. I tried to sit up, the four tugging at my arm, heart pounding. But before I could speak, she was gone. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't noticed yet. Do what? Signed what? My thoughts raced, but pain stitched me to the mattress again, breath trembling. I wanted to ask her later, but she didn't come back. She sent a text instead, one lonely bubble. Hope you're resting. People always remember courtesy when they want to hide cruelty. A few nights later, an orderly mentioned my car without realizing the depth of his words. That silver car of yours, nice ride. You drive a lot? My heart paused, then stumbled. Yes, I whispered. It's important to me. He smiled, unaware. Well, someone mentioned it looks brand new for its age. Must have taken real good care of it. Brand new. Taken care of. I always had. Oil changes on time, garage kept, detail by hand because it wasn't just transportation, it was my peace, my reward, my one indulgence in a life of sacrifice. Something in his tone, or maybe my sister's whisper days earlier, made my stomach twist. Like my instincts were trying to scream through anesthesia fog. The nurse came in, interrupting my thoughts. She lowered my bed gently and brushed a stray hair from my forehead like a mother might. Funny how strangers can hold more tenderness than family. Try to sleep, she said softly. Sleep. I would have given anything to sleep. But instead I lay there, eyes burning, staring at shadows dancing on the ceiling. And for the first time in a long time, loneliness didn't feel quiet. It felt sharp. Like betrayal already had its hand on the doorknob of my life, waiting to step in. I remembered all the times I'd been there for them. Driving my little brother to job interviews when he didn't even have a resume. Paying my sister's rent one winter when she swore she'd pay me back, she never did. Running errands for my mother when she said her legs hurt even though she just didn't want to leave the house. Always giving, always showing up, always putting myself second because love, I thought, was proven through sacrifice. But in that hospital bed, with tubes in my veins and my body stitched together, I learned something painful. Not everyone you sacrifice for would bleed for you. Days blurred together. Nurses rotated. Medication schedules marked time in fragmented intervals. Outside, life continued, people laughing in hallways, families visiting rooms, mothers holding their children's hands. No one held mine. When the 4 machine beeped one evening, the nurse silenced it and brought me another blanket. Her kindness was simple, but it cut deeper than she knew. You must have a strong family, she smiled softly. You'll go home to lots of help. I swallowed the ache, nodding, lying through clenched lips.
Yeah,
I whispered. Lots. But my voice cracked, and she noticed. And in that moment, the truth settled heavy in my bones. My body wasn't the only thing that had been opened. So had my reality. And it hurt more than the stitches. I thought recovering would be the hardest part. That learning to walk again, breathe deeply again, move without wincing would be the real battle. But as I lay there staring at the silent door, waiting for footsteps that never came, I realized something far crueler. I thought healing was the hard part. I didn't know betrayal was waiting right outside the hospital doors. Leaving the hospital felt like stepping out of a dream, or maybe stepping into one that had soured. The nurse handed me my discharge papers gently, like she knew I wasn't fully ready to carry the weight of the world again. My legs trembled slightly when I stood, not from weakness alone but from the shift, from being cared for to being forgotten again. "I hope someone's waiting for you at home," she said softly, squeezing my hand before I left. I nodded, even though the truth sat bitter in my chest. The drive home in a hospital transport van was quiet. The city outside the window moved in soft blurs, grocery store signs I had shopped at, the park where I once walked on Sundays, the laundry shop where the lady always folded my clothes with a smile. Life kept going, even when I paused. My house came into view, familiar and yet suddenly foreign. My heart beat a little faster. I imagined walking inside, being hugged, someone saying, "We're so glad you're home. We missed you. Sit, rest, we made soup." Ridiculous, maybe, but even lonely hearts hope. The van stopped, and the driver helped me to the sidewalk. The air smelled like fresh cut grass and spring. A fragile brightness I wanted to breathe all the way in. Then I saw it. Or rather, I didn't. The driveway was empty. Where my silver car should have been, shining, faithful, waiting, there was nothing but cracked cement and a fallen leaf trembling in the breeze. I blinked. Blinked again. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe one of them had moved it. Maybe it was parked down the street. My chest tightened, breath catching in my throat. That car wasn't just metal. It was a memory. A heartbeat on wheels. A gift from my late husband, the last expensive thing he surprised me with before illness claimed him. He had placed the keys in my hand with a smile and said, "Now you can drive anywhere you want. You're not stuck anymore." I could still hear his voice in the engine every time I turned the key. I could still feel his love in the steering wheel. But now, the space was empty. I swallowed hard and reached for something steady, but there was nothing, only the hospital bag slipping from my fingers and landing heavy on the ground. The front door opened. My sister stood there, arms crossed, lips tight, eyes flicking away like my gaze was something shameful. "Oh, you're home," she said flatly, like she'd been caught off guard. I forced a smile. "Where's my car?" Her jaw clenched, and she looked inside instead of at me. "Inside first. You shouldn't be standing this long." But I didn't move. My legs turned to marble beneath me. "Where is my car?" She didn't answer, because she didn't have the courage. It wasn't until my brother appeared behind her, hands in pockets, looking anywhere but at me, that the truth sank in like ice. He didn't smile. He didn't hug me. He just spoke, monotone, casual. "We sold it." My heart didn't stop, it shattered slowly, like glass spider webbing from the center. "What?" My voice wasn't even breath, it was a wound. "You weren't using it," he shrugged. "It was just sitting there. We figured it was better to get cash before it lost value." Cash. My husband's memory turned into pocket money. My sister chimed in, tone sharp to hide guilt. "Honestly, you should be grateful. We handled it. One less thing for you to worry about." Grateful. The word slapped me harder than the hospital needles ever did. I stared at them, my vision blurring, not from surgery pain but from betrayal so raw it felt like acid in my veins. "You didn't ask me," I whispered. My sister rolled her eyes. "We tried calling. They didn't. And anyway," she continued, "you were sedated. You would have wanted us to take care of things." My legs trembled again, and I steadied myself on the doorframe. How much? What? My brother asked. How much did you sell it for? He gave a short, guilty laugh. Does it matter? I stared. You spend it. Silence answered for them. Shame flickered across their faces, but shame is cheap when the damage is already done. They spent every penny. I felt something in my chest tighten until breathing hurt. There was a buzzing in my ears, a faint ringing that drowned out their excuses. It was just a car, my sister snapped, defensive now. You act like we sold your child. I almost laughed. Almost. But my throat closed around the sound until it turned into a silent cry instead. That car had been my child once. When grief hollowed me, it carried me. When loneliness devoured me, it reminded me I could still move forward. It had been the last piece of him. The last piece that still worked. And now it was gone, not lost, taken. I walked inside without another word, each step like dragging steel behind me. They said something behind me, some explanation, some justification I didn't hear. My ears only heard the hospital quiet again, echoing now in my own home. I went straight to my room, closed the door gently, because even broken hearts still care about politeness, and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Then I folded forward, arms around my stomach like I might hold myself together physically since no one else ever had, and I cried. Not loudly. Not shaking. Not dramatic. Just quiet, slow tears soaking into my hands. I cried for the car. For the man who bought it. For the version of me who once believed love meant loyalty. For the foolishness of thinking family always protects you. For thinking effort guaranteed faithfulness. I cried until my throat burned and my ribs ached and my chest felt hollow. That room saw the kind of pain hospitals don't treat. I wiped my tears eventually. Not because I felt better, because I had run out of them. My heart didn't feel broken in that moment, it felt emptied. Like everything inside had been scraped out with cold, greedy hands. And in that stillness, in that raw hollow space inside me, a truth settled. They didn't just sell a car. No. They sold the last piece of my dignity. And dignity, once taken, doesn't come back quietly. I woke the next morning feeling like my bones were made of glass, fragile, aching, one wrong movement away from shattering. Pain medication dulled the edges of my body but sharpened the edges of my reality. The house was quiet, but not peaceful, quiet in that way guilt leaves silence behind. Heavy. Suspicious. I moved slowly, partly because my body demanded it, partly because weakness made people underestimate you, and underestimation is a weapon if you hold it right. When I reached the kitchen, my sister stood by the counter scrolling her phone, coffee mug in hand. She looked up just long enough to offer a bright, fake smile. Feeling better, she asked, tone wrapped in sugar-coated apathy. I nodded, voice soft. A little. It was the kind of softness that made her smirk, she thought she'd broken me. The kind of softness predators mistake for surrender. I sat, hands trembling slightly, not from weakness this time, but from a rage so deep it pulsed under my skin like a second heartbeat. But rage, when used right, isn't fire. It's ice. And I was learning to freeze. Do you know where my car paperwork is? I asked gently, like someone trying to piece together a foggy memory. Her fingers stiffened on the phone. Why? I just want to make sure insurance is paused. I lied smoothly. Since, you know. No car. She relaxed, relieved I wasn't fighting. People love the version of you that stays small. They don't realize small things can still break skin when sharpened. Oh.
Yeah.
We put everything in that drawer, she waved toward the hallway. Don't worry, we handled everything. I smiled. I trust you. Lie. But lies are sometimes prayers, whispered to protect ourselves until truth sharpens. The moment she left the room, I stood, breathing slow so pain didn't betray urgency, and walked toward the drawer. I found the title folder, and I already knew what I would see before I opened it. My name. Only my name. No signatures. No transfer. No authorization. The car, legally, was still mine. They hadn't sold a car. They'd attempted theft. And stupidity was their co-conspirator. My fingers didn't shake when I closed the folder. There are moments in life where calm doesn't come from peace, it comes from clarity. From the quiet knowing that justice isn't loud, it's patient. I grabbed my bag and left the house without a word. My body protested each step, but determination held me upright. When I reached the DMV, the clerk looked at me with sympathy, maybe because my hospital wristband still clung to my arm. Maybe because grief has a way of sitting on your face like a bruise. How can I help you? She asked. I need to check the ownership status of a vehicle, I said, voice steady like ice settling. She typed, clicked, typed again. Yes, ma'am. The vehicle is still registered to you. No transfer has been processed. I exhaled, not from relief, but from confirmation. And if someone sold my car without my consent? I whispered. Her eyes softened. Then you didn't sell it. And they committed fraud. Fraud. Theft. Betrayal. Words heavy enough to drown in, yet suddenly they felt like air filling my lungs. Because naming a thing gives you power over it. I thanked her, left, and walked back into sunlight that suddenly felt warmer than yesterday, not because the day changed, but because I had. The drive back in a rideshare car felt surreal, like watching my life through a window, near enough to feel but distant enough to study. The driver spoke, but I barely heard him. My mind was stitching a strategy together with thread made of patience. When I got home, my siblings were laughing in the living room. Full belly laughs, not guilty giggles. Real joy, funded by betrayal. A shopping bag sat on the coffee table, shiny and expensive. A new gaming console box underneath. Receipts, bright like confetti, carelessly tossed aside. They spent my past, my memories, my husband's love, on entertainment. My brother noticed me and quickly pulled his feet off the couch like guilt had touched his ankles. Oh hey, he said, as if nothing happened. We grabbed some stuff. You should have seen the sale. Crazy deal. I nodded softly. That's nice. Inside, something deadly calm settled over me. They thought the hospital made me weaker. They thought a scar meant defeat. They forgot scars are proof we survived what they hoped would break us. I watched them, eyes gentle, heart steel. My sister boasted to a friend on the phone about the smart move they made selling the car. I caught pieces of conversation.
Yeah.
She wasn't driving it anyway. She's too soft to care. We needed the money more than the metal sitting there. Soft. Soft like snowfall before an avalanche. I walked quietly to my room and closed the door. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. My heart didn't race, it slowed. A predator calculating distance. I sat on the bed, pulled the folded hospital bracelet from my wrist, and held it between my fingers. Funny how a small plastic band can represent weakness one day and rebirth the next. A memory flickered, my husband's hands handing me the car keys, face lit with pride. "This is your freedom," he had whispered. Freedom. Not gift. Not luxury. Freedom. And they traded it for electronics and cheap bags. I placed the bracelet in my drawer and reached for my phone. One call. Just one. Not to scream. Not to beg. To verify the process. To learn what steps I needed. Tow company. Police non-emergency line. DMV return procedure. Knowledge is power. Silence is strategy. Calm is weaponry. I returned to the living room later, leaning on the doorframe like a woman still fragile. Mask of tiredness. Eyes soft. They barely looked up, they thought I had accepted everything. And maybe once, I would have. But pain changes people. Some break. Some bend. Some sharpen. Days passed and I moved gently through the house. Soft footsteps. Quiet tone. Pretending the betrayal was forgotten like they expected. Like they wanted. They bragged openly around me now, confident their cruelty was buried because I didn't yell. Yelling is for those who need to be heard. I didn't need them to hear me. I needed them to underestimate me. Every night, I lay in bed, body healing, mind sharpening. I replayed memories of the car, the road trips, the laughter, the quiet late-night drives when the radio hummed old love songs and grief rode shotgun but never spoke. I remembered polishing the dashboard by hand, whispering, "You and me. We keep going." That car wasn't transportation. It was loyalty in metal form. And loyalty is sacred to those who understand it. They didn't just steal transportation. They violated trust. Cashed in love. Bet against me. Poor choice. My plan grew quietly, like roots pushing through concrete. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't confront. I didn't accuse. I waited. Because revenge isn't satisfaction. Revenge is patience choosing its moment. And when the moment came, I would not shout. I would sign. Call. Retrieve. I would not explode. I would reclaim. For now, I stayed soft on the outside, gentle voice, tired eyes, slow steps. So they kept laughing. Kept spending. Kept underestimating. They thought I was still healing. But I wasn't. I was evolving. I woke up that morning with a stillness inside me, not peace, not joy, something sharper. A still, focused clarity. The kind you get when grief finishes burning and leaves steel behind. My siblings thought the silence meant surrender. They mistook quiet for defeat. They always had. The morning light washed across the room in pale gold. I sat on the edge of my bed, feet warm in slippers, hands calm on my lap. My body was still tender, stitches tugging like whispered reminders of pain, but strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the decision to stand up anyway. Breakfast clattered in the kitchen. Laughter trickled through the walls, new purchases, new gadgets, new selfish joy funded by my loss. They talked like I didn't exist, like betrayal was just Tuesday, like loyalty was optional. I brushed my hair slowly, tied it back, and walked to the living room with steady steps. Not hurried. Not shaken. Just still. Composed. My sister glanced up, forced a bright tone. Morning. Feeling okay? I smiled softly. Softness is the shield. Calm is the blade. A little better, I murmured. She relaxed. Good. Let her think I was harmless. It made what came next so perfectly poetic. I reached for the landline. Not my cell, I wanted them to hear every word. I dialed the tow company first. My voice steady, gentle, sugar-dipped in steel. Hello, I need to reclaim a vehicle registered in my name. It was sold without authorization. They asked for details, I gave them. Calm, factual, polite. They asked for proof, I already had it ready. Title copy. Registration. Insurance in my name. Everything lined up clean like I'd been preparing my whole life for this moment. All right, ma'am, the dispatcher said, tone respectful now. We'll handle it. Next call, police non-emergency line. Same gentle tone. Yes, I'd like to report an unauthorized vehicle sale and request officer presence during recovery. No anger. No shaking voice. Just calm female authority, the kind people are terrified of, because it means someone isn't emotional. They're certain. They're done. By the time I hung up, my siblings were watching me. Confusion pulling at their expressions, then unease. My sister's smile faltered. My brother paused halfway through unwrapping some shiny tech gadget. What are you doing? He asked, almost laughing, like the question could rewind reality. Handling something, I replied softly. I didn't owe more than that. Silence is a language of power when spoken at the right time. Within an hour, the tow truck rolled up the street, engine growling like destiny clearing its throat. A police cruiser followed behind, steady, quiet, impartial. My siblings froze. What the hell, my sister whispered. I stood at the window, breathing evenly, pulse calm. The officers approached the buyer's house, because of course I knew where my car was. They'd boasted loudly, thought I was too broken to listen. A knock. Raised voices. Confusion. Then the tow driver hooked up the car. My car. Silver paint catching the sun like it remembered me. Tires rolling back toward the street like it had been waiting for me too. The buyer burst out his door, face red with outrage. His voice boomed down the road. You can't take that. I bought that. Even from here, I could hear the officer's calm response. She's the legal owner, sir. The buyer sputtered, cursed, waved his arms helplessly. I didn't flinch. Betrayal taught me stillness. They loaded the car and began driving it up toward my house. My siblings rushed to the porch, panic replacing arrogance. Their purchases suddenly looked small in their hands. Pathetic. Temporary. Cheap. What did you do? My sister choked out, voice trembling. I opened the front door and stepped out slowly. Sunlight touched my face. My scars, physical and emotional, felt like armor now. I didn't answer her question. I didn't need to. The tow truck pulled into our driveway, my driveway, with my car. The driver nodded respectfully. Ma'am. We'll need your signature. I signed. Smooth. Elegant. No sweat. No shaking. My siblings stared like they were seeing me for the first time. Not the quiet caretaker. Not the free babysitter, the emergency loan, the always there fixer. They saw someone else now. Someone dangerous in her calm. The tow driver parked my car, handed me the keys like placing a crown back on its rightful head. The officer approached me, polite. If they spent the money, they're liable. Civil and possibly criminal. My sister stumbled back like the word criminal slapped her. My brother looked like his throat closed. I nodded once. Thank you. When they left, silence wrapped the house. Thick. Suffocating. My sister tried first, a voice shaking, face pale. You can't do this to us. I turned slowly. My expression soft, almost tender, the way you look at someone who dug their own grave and only now sees the dirt. I didn't do anything, I said quietly. It was my car. She swallowed. We thought you'd be grateful. I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I didn't explain betrayal to people fluent in it. I just walked to my car, opened the door, ran my hand over the steering wheel where memory lived. My husband's ghost rode shotgun for a breath, proud, steady, present. I sat, turned the key, and the engine hummed like an old friend saying welcome home. They hovered in the doorway, helpless, small. I didn't look at them when I spoke, because acknowledgement is privilege, and they hadn't earned it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself. I let the engine purr, a soft declaration of victory. I simply took back what was mine. I closed the door gently, not slammed, and that softness was the loudest thing I've ever done. The next few days felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion, and for once, I wasn't the one collapsing. The universe has a way of balancing ledgers you never thought would be settled. It began with a phone call. I was sitting on the porch, coffee cooling in my hands, the morning sunlight draping itself gently across the railing when the landline rang inside. My sister answered. I could tell from her tone that the caller wasn't delivering good news. Her voice dropped, trembled, rose again, panic layered under fake calm. When she hung up, her face had lost its color. That was the police, she said quietly, as if saying it softly could shrink the meaning. The buyer filed a complaint. They said we scammed them. I didn't look up. I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream dissolve like the last traces of mercy. Oh, I said simply. She waited for me to panic, to fix it, as I always did. But silence met her instead, thick and unyielding. She fidgeted. They said if we don't pay him back, they'll press charges. Mom, you have to call them, explain it was a mistake, we didn't mean. I looked at her then, steady and calm. You sold something that wasn't yours, I said. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. She blinked, lips parting like she just realized the ground beneath her wasn't solid. My brother came in behind her, voice sharp. This is getting out of hand. You could have handled this quietly. I smiled faintly. You're right. I could have. But you didn't ask me before you handled my car, did you? He looked away. They didn't know the best part yet, that the DMV had already forwarded the fraud report to the local precinct. That every paper trail led straight to their names, not mine. That for once, I wasn't the one cleaning up their mess. Karma doesn't need a warning. It simply shows up with receipts. That afternoon, I sat by the window reading the newspaper when they began pacing. The sound of panic is universal, fast footsteps, quick whispers, shallow breaths. "What are we going to do?" my sister hissed. "We don't have that kind of money," my brother shot back. Their words faded into background music. I had heard that tune all my life, their chaos, my responsibility. Rent money, bail money, tuition, debts. I had always saved them. I was their safety net, stitched from exhaustion. But this time, I had cut the strings. My sister turned to me suddenly. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "You can talk to them. Tell them we didn't know." I folded the newspaper slowly, deliberate. "You knew," I said softly. "You just didn't care." The next day, a memory hit me while washing dishes, soap bubbles, warm water, the rhythm of small domestic chores that used to anchor me. A flashback, a rainy night years ago. My brother's car had broken down on a highway. I drove 2 hours at midnight, headlights cutting through the downpour, to bring him home. He'd cried back then, thanked me for being his only family who ever showed up. I'd smiled, told him that's what love is. Now, watching soap swirl down the drain, I realized I had been mistaking love for servitude. Another memory, my sister at 19, trembling after her boyfriend left her pregnant and terrified. I sold my wedding ring to pay for her medical bills. I remember holding her hand through the night, whispering, "You're not alone. You'll never be alone as long as I'm here." Funny thing about always being there, people stop believing you have anywhere else to go. That evening, a knock came. Police. Calm, professional. They asked questions, I answered. Showed them my proof. They thanked me, assured me I was clear. The buyer would be refunded by the parties responsible. When they left, I turned and found my siblings standing in the hallway, pale and trembling. "They're making us pay back the money," my brother whispered, like he was confessing to a crime he hadn't yet processed. I nodded. "Good." He stared. "Good. We don't have it." I shrugged gently. "Then you'll learn how it feels to lose something you worked for." My sister's voice broke. "We made a mistake." "Why are you being so cold?" Cold. The word almost made me laugh. No, I wasn't cold. I was just done melting. That night, as their voices rose behind closed doors, I sat in my room under the soft glow of a lamp. I opened my journal and wrote quietly, and not about them, but about me. About the hospital. About the empty driveway. About how silence feels heavier than betrayal. And then I wrote something I hadn't said aloud in years. I deserve peace. For so long, I believed peace was something you earned by keeping others happy. But peace, I learned, isn't bought with obedience. It's claimed through boundaries. The days that followed were poetic in their unraveling. The buyer got his money back. My siblings had to borrow from the same friends they'd bragged to. Their reputation cracked under whispers. The same people who once called them smart started calling them selfish. Poetic, yes. Justice wrapped in everyday humiliation. One evening, my sister knocked softly on my door. I opened it just enough to see her eyes swollen from crying. "I don't understand," she said. "How can you just sit there like this?" I looked at her, the girl I once protected, fed, clothed, saved, and for the first time, I didn't see my sister. I saw the sum of my mistakes. Every unpaid debt I'd covered, every disrespect I'd forgiven, every apology I'd spoken to keep fake peace. "You taught me that love was giving," I said quietly. "But I forgot love is also choosing when to stop." She pressed her lips together, tears spilling. "We need you," she whispered. I shook my head. "You needed me when you sold what was mine." And I was there then, wasn't I? Now you need consequences. They'll teach you what I never could. She left without another word. That night I went for a drive. My car, my reclaimed memory, hummed beneath me, headlights slicing through the dark. Every street corner felt like a chapter one had already read, but for the first time, I wasn't reliving the pain. I was rewriting it. I thought about the sacrifices that built this moment, late shifts, sleepless nights, choices that cost me pieces of myself. I thought about every time they took and called it love. About every time I gave and called it duty. And I realized, I had mistaken endurance for virtue. But endurance without respect is just slow destruction. As I turned onto the old hill that overlooked the town, the city lights stretched below like stars scattered on earth. I parked, stepped out, and let the wind catch my hair. The night smelled like freedom, not sweet, not soft, but clean. They say revenge is fire. They're wrong. True revenge is quiet. It's reclaiming peace while they drown in noise. When I got home, the house was dark. My siblings had gone to bed early, exhaustion written across the silence. For once, it wasn't my burden to fix what they broke. I walked past their doors without pausing, without guilt. I didn't owe rescue anymore. I went to my room, brushed my hand along the car keys resting on the nightstand, and smiled faintly. They had expected the old me, the one who apologized for everything. But she didn't survive that hospital bed. If you believe the quiet ones always rise stronger, comment, strength in silence. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty anymore. There was a new kind of silence in the house, the kind that didn't ache. It breathed. For years, silence had been a punishment. Now it felt like peace slipping through the cracks, filling the space where chaos once lived. I woke up one morning to sunlight spilling across the floor, warm and uninvited, yet somehow comforting. It touched the curtains, the walls, the edges of the furniture like it was reminding me, you're still here. You made it. I swung my legs off the bed and sat for a long time, feeling the stillness settle around me. Then, almost without thinking, I whispered, thank you, not to anyone, just to the quiet. Healing wasn't cinematic. It didn't arrive with grand gestures or violins in the background. It came in small, almost invisible moments. It came the day I took my first walk to the park and realized I didn't need anyone to steady me. The path was uneven, the wind sharp, but my body remembered how to move. Each step felt like defiance, not against anyone else, but against the version of me who thought she'd never rise again. It came the morning I cooked breakfast just for myself. 2 scrambled eggs, toast, and tea. Nothing special. But the smell of butter melting on the pan, the sizzle of life returning to the kitchen, it was the first sound of belonging I'd heard in years. I bought a small notebook and started journaling. At first, the pages were stiff, hesitant, like my thoughts didn't know how to live outside my chest. But day by day, the words began to flow, anger, sorrow, gratitude, rebirth. Some days I wrote about what hurt, some days I wrote about what healed. But every word was a seed planted in the soil of my own rediscovery. The walls in my house had been beige for as long as I could remember, safe, dull, neutral, like me. One afternoon, I decided to change that. I went to the store, bought paint in a soft shade of sage green, and spent the entire weekend covering those tired walls. The smell of fresh paint filled the rooms, dizzying but pure. Every brushstroke felt like an apology to myself. For years, I had built my home around other people's comfort. Now, I was building it for peace. When I was done, I stood in the living room with paint on my hands and streaks in my hair, and I laughed, an unpolished, belly-deep laugh that startled me with how alive it sounded. The following week, I bought plants. Not plastic ones, are real, breathing, fragile things that needed care and sunlight. Peace lilies, snake plants, a fiddle leaf fig I named Grace. I lined them along the windowsill and whispered, "Grow, like I'm trying to." For the first time, nurturing didn't feel like servitude. It felt like participation in life again. One afternoon, as I was struggling to carry a large pot of soil from my car to the porch, a voice called out, "Need a hand?" I turned to see my neighbor, a man I'd waved to for years but never really spoken to. He smiled kindly, not pitying, just present. Together, we carried the pot inside. "You've been doing a lot around here," he said, looking at the freshly painted porch railings. "It's looking good." "Thank you," I said, and meant it. He nodded, brushed some dirt off his hands, and smiled again. "If you ever need anything, tools, help, or just company, I'm next door." That was how it began. Not romance. Not rescue. Just human connection, soft, simple, clean. A friendship that didn't demand or drain, only added. Sometimes he'd drop off fresh lemons from his tree, sometimes I'd bake an extra loaf of bread and leave it on his porch. There was no scoreboard, no guilt, just small exchanges that reminded me that kindness still existed, and it didn't have to cost me myself. Days turned into weeks, and I started seeing the world in color again. I joined a small book club at the local library. Every Thursday, we sat in a circle of mismatched chairs, reading stories that weren't about pain, but about possibility. I found myself laughing at jokes again, sharing thoughts, even staying after to chat. The librarian, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, once told me, "You have such a calm presence." If only she knew how much chaos it took to earn it. And then there was my car. My beautiful, silver Constant. I'd washed it one Sunday morning, water gleaming under the sunlight. When I slid into the driver's seat and turned the key, the engine hummed, low and familiar. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady, sure. For a moment, I just sat there, feeling the vibration of the engine against my palms, the rhythm of something that had survived being stolen, sold, reclaimed, and reborn. That car wasn't a vehicle anymore. It was a mirror, proof that what's taken can still find its way home if you refuse to stop claiming it. I began to drive again. Not to run errands, not to escape, just to exist. I drove to the coast, to the market, to nowhere in particular. The wind through the window carried laughter from passing strangers, the scent of fresh rain, and the promise that I didn't need permission to belong in the world anymore. Every mile whispered the same truth. Freedom doesn't come from being untouched, it comes from learning to touch life again after it's burned you. I slowly stopped answering my siblings' messages. The first few times, guilt lingered, like muscle memory from a life I'd outgrown. But every time I chose silence, peace grew louder. They called me selfish. They called me cold. But I knew what they couldn't see, I wasn't punishing them. I was protecting myself. Healing isn't revenge. It's hygiene. And I was finally clean. Sometimes, I'd sit on the porch in the evenings with a cup of tea, watching the sky soften into violet. My plants leaned toward the last stretch of light, and the car gleamed faintly in the driveway like an old loyal friend keeping watch. My neighbor would wave, or the librarian would text a quote from whatever book we were reading that week. I'd smile. These were small things, but they were mine. Simple, honest, and real. The house no longer echoed with guilt. It breathed with new life, scented with basil, lemon, and fresh paint instead of regret. One Sunday afternoon, I hosted a small dinner. My neighbor, the librarian, and a few people from the book club came over. We ate at the table I had refinished myself, under soft yellow light, with mismatched plates and laughter spilling between bites. No tension, no expectations. Just warmth. Just home. When we raised our glasses that night, the air felt lighter, as if the house itself had forgiven me for letting it suffer so long under ungrateful hearts. Someone said, "You've got such a lovely family here." I looked around the table, faces smiling, eyes kind, and I felt something deep in my chest settle into place. They were right. But not in the way they thought. After they left, I walked to the window, looking out at the silver car glinting under the porch light, my plants swaying gently by the glass. My reflection met me in the window, older, softer, but finally whole. I whispered it aloud, not for anyone else, but for me. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. Time has a way of revealing who people truly are, and who we become when we finally stop carrying the weight of others. Months passed like pages turning in a book I no longer feared reading. Life grew into something gentle. My days filled with things I chose, people I trusted, moments I owned. And then, as always, life tested that peace. It started with a text from my sister. "We need to talk. Please call." I stared at my phone for a long moment. No panic, no ache. Just quiet clarity. It wasn't urgency, it was habit that made them reach for me. The way thirsty roots reach for the same soil they drained. Then came a call from my brother. Then a message from my mother, who had never called unless she wanted something. The old me would have rushed. The old me would have answered, heart first, logic never. The old me would have been halfway to their door before finishing the message. But that woman no longer existed. Still, curiosity is a gentle thing, not a weakness, so when they arrived at my porch a day later, I was ready. They looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had simply grown. My sister's eyes darted around the porch, at the fresh paint, at the plants thriving in the sun, at the calmness she couldn't understand. My brother shifted, hands jammed in his pockets like a boy caught stealing candy. We should talk," she said quietly. I opened the door just enough to step out and stand in the frame. Not inviting. Not hostile. Just firm. "What do you need?" That question shook her. Real conversations start where guilt ends. My brother cleared his throat. "We're struggling. We need help. Things haven't been easy since everything." I nodded, empathetic, but unmoved. "I hope you figure it out," I said softly. My sister blinked, stunned. "We're family." Family. The word used to be a chain. Now it sounded like an idea I didn't subscribe to anymore. "Family doesn't take what isn't theirs," I replied calmly. "Family doesn't disappear when you're in a hospital bed. Family doesn't only show up when they need saving." My sister's voice cracked. "We were wrong. We know that. Please." "I forgive you," I said. Their heads lifted, hope flickering. "But forgiveness," I continued, "doesn't mean access." Silence fell, the kind that presses on lungs, heavy and undeniable. My brother looked away first. My sister swallowed hard. They weren't angry, they were shocked. Because for the first time, I wasn't bending. I wasn't cushioning the blow. I wasn't the safety net beneath their reckless leaps. I was simply free. They left quietly. No slammed doors, no accusations. Just the sound of two people walking away from the woman they never thought would outgrow them. I watched them go without sadness, only gratitude. Some endings are merciful, not painful. Some closures feel like cleansed air. Later that week, I went to the DMV. This time, not trembling, not asking. Signing papers felt ceremonial. Ink on form. Click of pen. Stamp on file. The title shifted fully, not just legally but symbolically, from a life where I was owned by obligation, into a life where I owned myself. A man nearby smiled politely as he saw me tuck the paperwork away. "New car?" he asked. "No," I replied softly. "Old one. Return to its rightful place." He nodded like he understood, even if he couldn't have. Some victories aren't loud. They don't need applause. They glow inside you. That evening, I set the table again. This time with intention. Warm plates. Linen napkins. Candles casting golden halos across faces I had chosen. My neighbor arrived with freshly baked bread. The librarian walked in holding a pie and 2 books, always prepared for either dessert or discussion. 2 women from the book club brought flowers from their gardens. Laughter filled the room long before dinner began. The kind of laughter that comes from people who have never taken from you, only shared with you. When everyone finally settled, plates full, eyes warm, I stood, not to command attention, but to honor a moment that deserved to be noticed. My voice didn't need volume. It carried on tenderness and steel. To everyone who was left alone when they needed love. To everyone who rebuilt themselves in silence. To everyone who lost something and came back stronger. We sit at the head of our own table now. Glasses lifted. Glass clinked softly, like promises being made to ourselves rather than to the world. A tear slipped down my cheek, not from sadness, but recognition. Healing doesn't erase scars, it lights them from within. A life once built on sacrifice now rested on choice. Later, after guests left and laughter still echoed like music in the walls, I walked outside. The night air carried a hush, soft and forgiving. I rested my hand on the hood of my car, cool, solid, loyal. It wasn't about metal anymore. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about justice. It was proof. Proof that you can lose what matters, and if you rise, truly rise, you gain something far greater. Not things. Not victories. Self. I whispered into the night, almost to the wind itself. They sold my car. But I found my freedom. And this time, I didn't cry. I smiled. If life ever forced you to start again, tell your story below, I am listening.